Hey there guys, it's Metro, aka Mad Napkins, and we are back again. This time I'm going to take a look at something a little different. I've been thinking a lot about this whole Alliance and Horde thing. If you haven't heard, they're going to allow them to play together in 9.2.5. That's still pretty far away, but it's already got me thinking pretty heavily about what the factions are looking like. So we're going to take a look at some actual numbers here, and we're going to go in-game and take a look at some numbers too, because what we're seeing on the screen right now, a lot of this especially is driven by groups that are coordinating, playing together as a group of 5 for a long period of time. And yeah, sure, obviously that counts. But I think for most people, you're not really out there complaining about your faction not having a group of people you can play and progress with. You're probably more upset that when you go to do a key on a weekday night, you can't find what you're looking for. That's what I've been doing. Obviously, pugging is my bread and butter, and we've been spending a lot of time on Alliance recently. And to much my chagrin, I am very sad to see how few keys are actually being listed. But I have this weird hypothesis that there's not actually fewer players. It's actually just a lot of keystones not being listed. So we're going to take a look at some raw data here. This is a really interesting topic as well, going hand in hand with the fact that they are now doing a top 0.1% seasonal title there, which is something they've not done ever. They've never really given any type of prestige rewards. This is something new for Shadowlands. But anyway, the stats between Alliance and Horde are interesting, and they're very different from EU to US, but I am going to just look at US as a microcosm. I will say that there seems to be about twice as many players on EU, and there's even more players on Korea, finding an awful lot of success. So it's pretty crazy. I mean, here's the Korea stat. You will see 2,900 is the 0.1%. That's pretty crazy. That's Korea. Obviously, way fewer players total, but you see a lot more Horde. So I would definitely say that US is a lot more balanced. Obviously, we also have Europe with a high diversity of players and having a lot of success. But I think US is what we're going to take a look at here today because it's the most balanced and of course where I actually play. So let's just look at the raw numbers here and get an example. So this is anybody who's basically doing any type of key, right? If you're not 1,500 at this point, you're really not really doing keys. I wasn't actually sure where 1,500 would get you, but yeah, that's basically all tens in time. So if you've been doing keys for any elongated period, of course, you would have around 1,500 scores. On Horde, we actually have 200,000, so 220,059. That's a really large number, and that indicates the number of characters that have reached this. In terms of Alliance, you have literally under half that, so 100,000, 112,698. So that is about half. The reason they made this chart though is not necessarily based on how many players exist, but to show whatever the 0.1% is so you can know what score you're chasing. Now, I will say this is definitely going to change. I'm recording this on a Saturday of the push week, which would have been in the past here, and obviously a lot more people are going to go up. In fact, I looked at this just 2 or 3 days ago and it's not changed whatsoever, which doesn't make any sense because obviously there's people rising rapidly right now. This is one of the easiest weeks that could ever exist, so obviously there's going to be a lot more people getting up into that 2,800 rating. But we see some similar percentages all the way up through. Now 2K is of course Keystone Master. A lot of people are aiming for that because of course that's the threshold you need to get to be able to maximize your gear upgrading. Really good for alts, really good for anybody who's raiding but not taking Mythic Plus too serious. So we see 141,417. So still not even under half the people who get to 1,500, but still almost double. It's actually a lot closer though. This is 141,000. This is only 68,000. So yeah, it's a lot closer, but we still have a very wide margin here, 68,000 on Alliance. So then it stops looking at things by score and starts looking at percentage. So now we're going to see the numbers differ substantially, but we have in the top 60%, which I guess based on this number is actually under 1,500. As of right now, we're looking at 264,330 people compared to 158,000 on Alliance. So again, getting the numbers closer there, not as bad. We're not quite at half anymore. And it keeps going that way, 165,000 here, then to 98,000, almost about 99,000 for Alliance. Then we have 66,000 here for the top 10%. This is starting to become a number that I think a lot of people are very capable of reaching. If you're above 2K, you know, just slightly, you're doing maybe 17s, 18s, you'll probably see 2.1, 2.2 pretty commonly, but you start to see the big difference here in scoring because this is the big noticeable thing for me is that Alliance players, the top 10% are actually almost 100 points different. And we have only 40,000 here on Alliance compared to 66,000, but that number is getting slimmer. It's becoming a lot more competitive, but they're still almost 100 points different. So obviously when you baseline it based on the rating, you can see things a little bit differently, but now we're looking at percentages. So you're starting to understand why there's people saying that there's so much less people on Alliance. Alliance. Top 1%, this is about where I was on my old DK. I was 2576, I believe, so a little bit higher than this. And this is 6,609 characters. So I was above the top 1%, probably like 0.9%. And on Alliance, I've actually superseded this too. So I'm doing pretty good. 3955. I believe my new Night of Death Knight is about 2.4, maybe 60, something like that. But yeah, about 4,000 on Alliance and almost 7,000 on Horde, but we are starting to get a lot better. But again, this is now starting to become a really wide margin when you're looking at the difference here. 25-23 is a big difference from 24-54, because for example, I have mostly 20s, a few 21s, and a few 22s right now. I still have, I think, an 18 and a 19 on Fortified, but that character is just over 24-50. Whereas on my Horde character, I have every single key at 22 with 121 and 123, and that has me well above 25-50. So that's almost a full key level and a half difference on average in between that 100-point swing there. And that really starts to add up. You know, that's a big difference for a lot of players, getting above 20, 21, 22, 23. These keys start to become massive increases after each increase. And then finally, the 0.1% title. There are 662 characters on Alliance, on Horde that is, and on Alliance only 400. So, but again, this is a lot. A lot of this is going to be based on people getting together, playing, and pushing themselves. Obviously, very unlikely you're going to be doing a 30 in a pug with no voice with people you've never played with before. So let's take a look at something a little bit more my style, my bread and butter. We're going to go in game. I'm going to look at my Death Knight on Horde and my Death Knight on Alliance. We're going to take a look at what prime time on push week on a Saturday evening looks like in game on both factions. 9 o'clock on Saturday, 9 o'clock Eastern, so it might still be a little early for people on the West Coast, but I feel like this is prime time. This is about 2 hours into the normal rating schedule. A lot of people playing on Saturday evening, obviously one of the busiest nights. And again, this is push week. This is the best possible week, very deep into the season here. But I'm going to sit here and refresh this for a fair amount of time. We're going to take a look at the amount of keys that exist. Now, I have an add-on or a weak core. I'm not really sure what's doing it, to be honest, but something that's eliminating keys that already have tanks in them. So this will only be tanking excluded. So any key that doesn't have a tank that's currently looking for a tank, which is of course what I'm looking to join. We're only looking at keys above 20. So we're currently searching for 21 right now. And then I'm going to add them up and we'll present all the data here. So about 10 minutes go by since we logged on and we actually see 18 unique keys in that time. I just sat here, refreshed, made sure I wasn't looking at the same person. Within a 10-minute stretch on a push week, prime time US, 18 unique keys above 20, from 20 to 22. Obviously, there's probably even more keys higher than that, but I feel like 20 is a range that a lot of people are reaching. A lot of people are getting to pretty comfortably, looking for those portals, maybe kind of losing motivation at that point. I have seen people even jokingly say that once they get to 20s, they're going to stop. But anyway, that's Horde. So one other experiment I do want to run, something that might be a little controversial, but I want to run it anyway. I think it's a really important insight. A lot of people say they have trouble getting into keys. Well, you could always do your own key, even though I'm not a big proponent of doing my own key. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to list the easiest key possible this week. That is Necrotic Wake 20. I always would recommend people do this in the past just to see how many people are actually out there doing keys. Because a lot of people are constantly like, oh, I can't get into keys, man. It's impossible. They start blaming Blizzard or start blaming Raider.io or something like this. But I always say, like, just list a 20 of whatever the easiest key is and see how many people actually sign up, because you'll be staggered. You can invite everybody who signs up, of course. So I'm going to leave this up here for about 5 minutes, 9:22. We'll be back at 9:27, and I'm going to take a log of every unique individual player start up. Again, I apologize. Anybody signed up to the group thinking it's a real group, but I'm only going to do it for 5 minutes, nothing crazy. I just want to see how many people actually sign up, especially when you're the tank, and this should give a more representation of what's actually happening on the pugging front, because for some reason it feels like there is plenty of players on Alliance, even though the mathematics show there's clearly less players on Alliance. I would reckon that a lot of those people on Horde, the higher percentage of those people are actually just doing keys all together, and there's probably a lot less people doing that on Alliance because there's a lot less successful rating groups on Alliance as well. So for some reason it feels like there's just less people actually listing keys on Alliance. Let's see what happens on this front. 9:27, as said, 8 individuals have signed up to the group. We'll give a chance here for a 9th, but that's a shockingly low number. And I think 4 of them were healers. Yeah, that's a very low number. I feel like we're going to see more on Alliance, but let's let the numbers speak for themselves. Now we're going to go ahead and log off and go on our Alliance character. Here we are on the Alliance now. Same thing, US, we're going to take a look at 21 as the search filter and see just how many keys are listed. Of course, we're going to go ahead and remove that one, but I'm going to sit here for about, I think we did about 8 to 9 minutes. We're going to take a look at that same range here, list every individual key and compare the results. So after about 9 minutes, we are back and we have seen 7 or 8 unique keys. I'm not really sure how you want to handle this. I'm going to let you know what happened here. These guys had listed a key, the 3 of them together, something about Oceanic. They had originally listed Sanguine, they took it down, then they listed like Theater or something else, and then they took that down and listed Sanguine again. Not really sure. Obviously, it's probably a group of 3 people playing together and they're just changing which key they're listing. Technically, it's a different key, even though it's the same people. So it's either 7 or 8, depending on how you quantify that, but about half the keys, which is kind of exactly what the stats were showing on Ready Row. But let's take a look at what it looks like if I list what would be now the 4th key listed right now. So we will see. I've been hypothesizing that there is still a lot of people looking for keys because every time I do sign up to a key, there seems to be no shortage of people signing up to them. They're just not accepting them. I'm not really sure. We already have somebody in the queue, a much faster situation than we already seen on Horde, but it's weird. I'll join these keys. There'll be like 3 or 2 keys listed. I'll sign up to all of them. They all need tanks and none of them accept me. Then I'll finally get into one and there'll just be like 20 people signing up to it and they don't invite anyone. I don't really know what the situation is here. Faxi said maybe these guys are recording a video too, like I am, but I don't really know. So we'll be back in about 5 minutes. Looks like we're already gonna blow way past the Horde number. All right, in this time we have had 12 unique players sign up to this, which is interesting because that is about 4 more than what we had. That shows you something, right? I mean, there's fewer keys on Alliance, but there's actually more people signing up to and looking for keys on Alliance as well. And here's a 13th person while we're talking here, Mags, Resto Shaman, and also another player, Horichu. All right, so I apologize to anybody signing up to this thinking this is a real key, but yeah, so as you can see, there is definitely more people looking for keys on Alliance than there are on Horde. Now, a couple things to consider on this. One, that could be simply because there's just less keys being listed, so the same amount of player pool is now distributed across the fewer keys, and that's kind of been my point the whole time, that there's actually a fair amount of people pugging Mythic Plus at a relatively high level, what most people would probably consider a progression level, but there's just people listing keys less, and I don't really know what that is. Personally, for me, I really don't like doing my own key. I have a bit of a problem psychologically with it. I often feel like, you know, everything that happens in my own key is 100% my fault because I invited those people. So if they play poorly or I do something wrong, I just take it really critically. A little bit too much stress. I like to try to relax and have fun, put my best foot forward. Somebody else's key makes it a little bit more comfortable. So I don't know, maybe there's other people in that boat, but I think a lot of people are probably scared to put their own group together, and maybe that has something going there for it on Alliance. You see that more commonly. The other thing to consider is that I listed a 20 necrotic wake on both. Well, maybe on Horde, a lot more people are way past 20. So there's just less people looking for that key. I don't know if that's the case because obviously you would assume that no matter how many people are at which progression level, 20 is a really good target for almost everybody out there. Perhaps right at this point on Saturday, kind of deep into the week already, just a lot less people looking for that type of key. So the good thing is you can do this experiment on your own too. If you feel like the Saturday night on push week isn't a great time to do it, maybe you can do it on another day on another night. If you want to do something like this, go ahead and tell me your result in the comments below. I'm actually really interested in hearing them, especially if you play on somewhere like EU. Sure, it's substantially different on EU. I've heard people say that they've had upwards of like 20 plus keys listed at any given time on EU. Not the case here on US. Things are definitely quieting down at the end of a patch, but this is really the best possible week to pug, and I really don't feel like people should be afraid to pug, especially if all you do is trying to have fun and have some progression along the way. I've been easily able to pug up to 2,500 effectively on 2 characters now, but I ultimately wanted to make this video because this whole Horde versus Alliance thing that's going to get taken down and replaced with 9.2.5 system where you're going to be able to opt in playing with the opposite faction sounds like a pretty big deal. Currently been playing on Alliance, and I'll quickly give you a summary of what my thoughts have been. I played on Horde for pretty much my entire life. It was always kind of the only place I knew. Over the last few years, people have been consistently saying it's the only real place to play if you want to play competitively, and I can see why they say that, especially if you're looking to raid. Horde just has way more people playing that level. Raiding guilds, it's something like 3-to-1. Mythic Plus, it looks like it's something like 2-to-1, but it's a lot closer. Obviously, Mythic Plus is a lot more accessible. You can kind of just hop on and do whenever you want. But if we're talking about pugging something like Mythic Plus, what's actually going to change in 9.2.5? Well, the way I see it as Horde, a lot of people probably won't have any reason to even consider adding Alliance to their pool. Since the population is basically 2-to-1 right now, why would you? Maybe there'll be 7 keys instead of 5 keys. Maybe you'll have 10 applicants instead of 7 applicants, but what's the actual purpose to doing it? Unless it's on by default, which who knows how they're going to actually do it with the interface, I don't really see a reason why Horde would do it. And I honestly think that's a good thing. Since I've been playing on Alliance, it does seem like people are a lot more likely to just be calm and do a key and have fun while doing it. Horde was, you know, potentially more skillful at times, but a lot more just kind of confused and backwards. Like, people were in this race to get in and out of the key, and if it didn't go perfectly, they would just leave and start insulting each other and immediately disband. One of the most common things I've seen on Horde is where just everybody kind of just starts blaming one person. They all kind of dogpile on them, and then they'll like start whispering the person nasty stuff and then put them on ignore before you could even apply. The amount of times that's happened to me on Horde, I've literally not had that happen a single time. Actually, I think I had it happen one time on Alliance. I've actually had people whisper me and have, you know, what might look like relatively hostile conversations, but it always ends amicably. We always just have a real conversation like adults. Nobody ever puts me on ignore like a child, honestly, and then prevents me from replying to them. So the player base here on Alliance, even though it's smaller, even though it's less progressive, even though it might be worse overall, you can actually get a lot more done because you don't have to constantly drift through keys waiting to figure out if the Demon Hunter DPS is going to leave over some nonsense that's barely relevant to the success of the key. And honestly, we're doing the same keys too. I'm playing a Blood DK the exact same way. This character is actually weaker than the other one, and I had a chance at my first 23 today. So we're almost caught up with only about 8 weeks of play here on Alliance, maybe less. It's so much easier to progress. Even though it's so much easier to finish keys, it is harder to find the key you need though. So if you're looking for very specific points, trying to get score from a specific dungeon, it's going to be a lot harder to do that. That being said, it's been a nice breath of fresh air just playing Alliance, seeing the races. Never really got to play Night Elf. I've always wanted to. I love some of the racials on Alliance, so it's really cool to see. But in terms of what Alliance might do with this 9.2.5 solution, I'm thinking it might work out pretty well here because, like I said, what's the incentive for your average Horde player who I'm describing here, who might be this very hasty person? They want to get in and out, and if anything goes wrong, they might leave, start insulting each other, etc. What's the incentive that that person has to invite an Alliance character? In fact, I've seen a lot of that type of prejudice over there, and shame to say I bought into it. When I came over to Alliance, I thought really everything that was being said about them was true, and it's kind of just not. Kind of the opposite, actually. Almost like kind of foolish to think that any of that was true, and it makes a lot of sense why people would say that, because they're the problem that I'm trying to get away from here on Alliance. So would that type of player that I'm trying to get away from actually want to play with an Alliance character? Good chance that they wouldn't, and that might work out really well here. So what I'm worried about is that as an Alliance, if there's only 3 keys listed and we opt into playing with Horde and now there's 5 keys listed, maybe those keys that are populated with Horde players are going to be exhibiting the same tendencies I saw when I was pugging purely on Horde, where we had people constantly leaving and bickering and arguing over nothing. Instead, I'm hoping that the people who might be opting in to play with Alliance might be among the more rational, the more calmer, the people who are actually looking to just have fun and play the game and find success along the way. That might work out, might be the best of both worlds, might see more keys on Alliance and more people that are actually people who you really want to play with and pug with and succeed with. So anyway, that's my thoughts. It's a complicated topic. There's a lot going on with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on this below. I think this is a really interesting topic, and especially as the game ages, it's really important that everybody has a realistic grasp of what's real and what's not. Like I said, I have totally been on the wrong side of that argument, and I'm glad to have taken a chance to look at what the reality of things is, learn a little bit more, become a better player in the long run. So thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.